The United States government, under the Trump administration, announced new tariffs on goods from China, Canada, and Mexico on February 1, 2025. These tariffs are set to take effect on February 4, 2025. The tariffs will target a range of goods imported from these countries. The tariffs are set at different levels for each country. For China, a 10% tariff will be imposed on all goods. Canada and Mexico face a higher tariff rate of 25%. The announcement of these tariffs has sent shockwaves through the global economy. Financial markets have reacted negatively. Asian stock markets experienced a downturn. Cryptocurrencies also saw a decline. U.S. and European stock futures have slumped. The sudden shift in trade policy has created uncertainty and anxiety in the markets. The Trump administration has defended the tariffs. They argue that these measures are necessary to protect American interests. They cite concerns over unfair trade practices, national security, and illegal immigration as justification. However, the targeted countries view these tariffs as unfair and protectionist. They have vowed to retaliate with their own tariffs on U.S. goods. The implementation of these tariffs marks a significant escalation in trade tensions between the United States and its major trading partners. This situation has the potential to trigger a global trade war. The consequences of such a conflict could be severe. Businesses and consumers around the world could face higher prices, reduced trade, and slower economic growth. The Trump administration has cited several reasons for imposing these new tariffs. These reasons vary depending on the country targeted. For China, the primary concern is the ongoing trade deficit. The U.S. government accuses China of unfair trade practices. They allege intellectual property theft and forced technology transfer. Additionally, the U.S. accuses China of not doing enough to curb the flow of fentanyl precursor chemicals into the country. In the cases of Canada and Mexico, the Trump administration's justification centers on issues of immigration and drug trafficking. The U.S. government accuses both countries of failing to stem the flow of illegal immigrants and illicit drugs, particularly fentanyl, across their borders. They argue that these tariffs are a necessary tool to pressure these countries into taking more aggressive action. The U.S. alleges that Mexican drug trafficking organizations are collaborating with the Mexican government. They accuse these organizations of exploiting porous borders to smuggle drugs into the United States. The Trump administration blames Canada for not doing enough to stop the flow of illegal immigrants crossing the border from the U.S. into Canada. These tariffs represent a significant departure from traditional trade policy. The Trump administration's focus on issues like illegal immigration and drug trafficking as justification for tariffs is unusual. Critics argue that these tariffs are more about political posturing than legitimate economic concerns. They believe that the tariffs will ultimately harm American businesses and consumers, while doing little to address the underlying issues. China has reacted swiftly and strongly to the announcement of U.S. tariffs. The Chinese government has condemned the tariffs as unjustified and harmful. They argue that the tariffs violate international trade rules and undermine the global trading system. In response, China has vowed to take necessary countermeasures to protect its interests. These countermeasures include retaliatory tariffs on a range of U.S. goods. The Chinese government has carefully selected these goods to target sectors where the U.S. would feel the most economic pain. China hopes that by imposing targeted tariffs, they can pressure the U.S. to reconsider its actions. Beyond retaliatory tariffs, China has also announced its intention to challenge the U.S. tariffs at the World Trade Organization, or WTO. China argues that the U.S. tariffs violate WTO rules and are therefore illegal. However, the effectiveness of a WTO challenge is uncertain. The WTO's dispute settlement system has been weakened in recent years, in part due to actions taken by the Trump administration. China has also pushed back against the U.S. accusations regarding fentanyl. They claim to be one of the world's toughest countries on counternarcotics. China points to its stringent regulations imposed in 2019, which they claim have significantly reduced the flow of fentanyl precursors from China. They argue that fentanyl is primarily a U.S. issue, driven by domestic demand and production. Section 4. Claim Rejection. Note China's counterclaims about their counter-narcotics efforts. China has vehemently denied the U.S. accusations regarding their role in the fentanyl crisis. They argue that they have been unfairly targeted, and that the U.S. is attempting to deflect blame for its own domestic problems. China points to its track record of cooperation with international organizations and its own strict domestic regulations on fentanyl-related substances as evidence of their commitment to combating the drug trade. China claims that its 2019 scheduling of all fentanyl-related substances as controlled substances has significantly curtailed the production and trafficking of these drugs within its borders. They highlight their cooperation with U.S. law enforcement agencies in joint operations targeting fentanyl traffickers. China argues that the U.S. is ignoring these efforts and scapegoating China for political purposes. Furthermore, China has criticized the U.S. for not doing enough to address the root causes of its fentanyl crisis. They argue that the U.S. needs to focus on reducing demand for opioids through prevention, treatment, and recovery programs. China believes that the U.S. is too focused on blaming external actors rather than addressing its own internal issues. China's strong rebuttal of the U.S. accusations underscores the complex geopolitical dynamics at play in the current trade dispute. The fentanyl issue has become a major point of contention between the two countries, further escalating tensions. China's stance demonstrates that they are unwilling to back down or accept blame without a fight. They are prepared to defend their reputation and interests on the international stage. Section 5. Canada and Mexico's responses. Like China, Canada and Mexico have condemned the U.S. tariffs and vowed to retaliate. Both countries view the tariffs as unjustified and harmful to their economies. They have announced plans to impose retaliatory tariffs on a range of U.S. goods. These tariffs are carefully chosen to target sectors where the U.S. will feel the most economic pain, aiming to pressure the U.S. to reconsider its actions. Canada has announced retaliatory tariffs of 25% on 30 billion Canadian dollars, or 20 billion US dollars worth of U.S. goods effective immediately. This will be followed by tariffs on an additional 125 billion Canadian dollars, or 86 billion US dollars of U.S. imports in 21 days. These tariffs target a range of U.S. products including steel, aluminum, and agricultural goods. Mexico has announced that it will implement retaliatory tariffs and other measures, with details to be announced soon. Mexico's response has been measured but firm. They have rejected the U.S. accusations of government collaboration with drug traffickers and have defended their efforts to combat drug trafficking and illegal immigration. The coordinated response from Canada and Mexico demonstrates the strong opposition to the U.S. tariffs. Both countries are prepared to defend their interests and are willing to engage in a trade war if necessary. Section 6. Economic and political consequences. The economic and political consequences of these tariffs are far-reaching. Economically, the tariffs are expected to disrupt global supply chains, raise prices for consumers, and slow economic growth. The tariffs could potentially push Mexico into a recession. In the United States, the tariffs are likely to contribute to inflation by increasing import costs. Politically, the tariffs have strained relations between the United States and its closest trading partners. The tariffs have fueled anti-American sentiment in China, Canada, and Mexico. They have also weakened the rules-based international trading system. The tariffs have created uncertainty and instability in the global economy. The tariffs represent a high-stakes gamble by the Trump administration. While the tariffs may achieve some of their intended goals, they also carry significant risks. The tariffs could backfire, harming the U.S. economy and damaging relations with key allies. The long-term consequences of these tariffs remain to be seen. Section 7. Conclusion. The imposition of tariffs by the United States on China, Canada, and Mexico marks a significant escalation in global trade tensions. The tariffs have been met with swift condemnation and retaliatory measures from the targeted countries. The potential for a prolonged trade conflict is high, with far-reaching economic and political consequences. The tariffs threaten to disrupt global supply chains, increase prices for consumers, and slow economic growth. They have also strained relations between the United States and its closest trading partners, undermining the rules-based international trading system. The situation remains fluid, with no clear resolution in sight. The coming weeks and months will be critical in determining whether these trade disputes can be resolved through diplomacy or whether they will escalate into a full-blown trade war with